The Apocalypse of Peter. The vision of hell that early Christians were too afraid to read aloud. Before Dante, before Revelation, before the flames of medieval paintings, there was Peter. And what he saw in his apocalyptic vision wasn't a warning, it was a courtroom. A spiritual slaughterhouse where justice wasn't delayed, it was eternal. What Peter witnessed? Jesus shows Peter a hell divided by sin, where each transgression has a specific, horrifying punishment. Not for criminals. Not for kings. But for regular people. Churchgoers. Neighbors. Parents. Fire liars, suspended by their tongues over burning pits, their words now the chains that torment them. Broken-heart adulterers, hung by their hair and feet, scorched by scorching winds of regret and lust. Drop-of-blood women who aborted children, forced to face the souls of those unborn, now shaped like flame serpents, biting back in eternal revenge. And perhaps most controversial of all, parents who taught their children blasphemy were made to listen forever as their children cursed them from flaming pits. This wasn't just about morality, it was about accountability, to a degree most churches today would never preach. Why it was suppressed. The Apocalypse of Peter was one vote away from being canonized. For a while, it was even read in some early churches as scripture. But as time passed, the church began to fear it. Too brutal. Too specific. Too real. Because it didn't paint hell as a mystery. It named the sins, described the fire, and showed a Jesus who didn't just forgive, but enforce divine law without flinching. That was terrifying. And perhaps that's why you've never heard this vision in Sunday school. Because Peter saw a side of eternity that no one wants to admit might be real. The vision of St. Paul, Visio Pauli. The apostle who saw what most humans aren't allowed to remember, and came back shaking. There's a reason Paul said, "I knew a man who was caught up to the third heaven," but refused to tell you what he saw. Because what he witnessed wasn't just paradise. It was punishment. Endless. Divine. Unfiltered. The vision of St. Paul, also known as Visio Pauli, was so disturbing that church fathers debated whether it was divinely inspired or demonically revealed. But the details were too precise, too consistent with earlier Jewish apocalyptic texts, and far too terrifying to ignore. Paul's descent into the realms of the damned. In this vision, Paul is escorted by an angel, not to heaven, but downward, into a horrifying tour of hell's inner sanctums. And this is where it gets controversial. Fire fornicators were chained naked, gnawed by worms that never die, their bodies regenerated just to suffer again. Ice Cube the greedy stood buried waist deep in ice, crying out as blazing winds flayed their skin like razors. Test tube sorcerers and deceivers were locked inside transparent pits, tormented not just by fire, but by the knowledge of the truth they rejected. But the worst fate? Whole a river of pitch, black, boiling, stretching endlessly, where those who denied justice and life were turned upside down, their mouths filled with molten darkness. It wasn't fire and brimstone. It was precision. Each punishment wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Designed to pierce the soul's deepest regret and magnify it forever. The disturbing revelation Paul receives. Near the end of the journey, Paul asks his angel guide, "Is there any hope, any relief?" And the answer? Only silence. Because in Paul's vision, there is no end to the sentence. No appeal. No final breath. Only memory, fire, and the echo of chances missed. Why the church feared this vision. This wasn't the soft version of Christianity taught centuries later. This was raw, apocalyptic judgment. And it shook even the righteous. Some early Christians feared that reading this vision might cause spiritual despair. Others believed it was a true warning, delivered from the throne of God. But here's the twist. The vision of Paul spread faster than many of the Gospels. It was translated into dozens of languages. Read in secret. Taught underground when the official church wouldn't endorse it. Because people knew. If Paul, the chosen apostle, had to see this, then hell was far more real than most were willing to admit. The Book of Enoch, punishment for the watchers. the angels who fell for desire, and were damned before man ever sinned. Before hell was known to man, it was already occupied. Not by humans, but by angels. Divine beings, thrown into an abyss so dark, even light was forbidden to touch it. The Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish text banned from the Bible, tells a version of hell so cosmic, so blasphemous, that religious authorities buried it for centuries. And it begins with a rebellion. Who were the Watchers? The Watchers were angels, divine beings sent to watch over humanity. But they didn't just watch. They lusted. They crossed the line between the celestial and the earthly, taking human women, birthing giant offspring called the Nephilim, and teaching mankind forbidden knowledge, sorcery, weapon-making, astrology, even beautification rituals to manipulate desire. This wasn't disobedience. This was contamination of bloodlines, souls, and divine law. And their punishment? Something no human was ever meant to witness. The abyss, their eternal prison. God commands the archangel Uriel to bind the Watchers and throw them into a place called the abyss. Not metaphorically, but physically. Locked chained beneath jagged mountains. Whole cast into a black pit where no light ever enters, and no sound escapes. Calendar to remain imprisoned until the day of judgment, a sentence so long even angels forgot their names. And as for their hybrid children, the Nephilim? Comet their souls became unclean spirits, the origins of what we now call demons. Wandering the earth. Craving flesh. Unable to rest. This is hell before mankind ever sinned, an angelic war crime punished by eternal isolation in the bowels of creation. Why this terrified early religions? The Book of Enoch wasn't excluded from the Bible because it lacked relevance. It was too relevant. It claimed angels could fall. That they could breed. That demons weren't created by Satan, but were the bastard spirits of a cosmic sin the church never wanted to explain. Even today, churches refuse to teach this vision. Because if Enoch is right, then hell isn't just for the wicked. It's the cosmic garbage pit of failed divine experiments and punished gods. A vision of hell so ancient. It predates the devil. The Testament of Abraham. When a righteous man begged to live, because he saw where the dead were going. Most people fear death because they don't know what comes next. Abraham feared it because he saw it. And when he saw the judgment, he begged the angel to let him live just one more day. Not to enjoy life, but to prepare for what was coming. The Testament of Abraham is a forgotten apocalyptic vision where the Father of Nations is shown the afterlife, not paradise, but a divine courtroom where every soul, regardless of status, faith, or power, is exposed. What Abraham witnessed. Abraham, though old and nearing death, is taken on a divine journey by the angel Michael. What he sees isn't peaceful rest or heavenly light. It's judgment. He sees a colossal being named Dokiel, the angel of accounting, recording every human deed, even thoughts and intentions. Balanced scale he sees Abel, yes, that Abel, sitting as the chief judge of the souls, weighing the good and evil of every person who ever lived. Angry face with horns he sees souls begging for another chance as angels drag them toward dark chasms, while others fall by the weight of their sins alone. One soul, trembling before judgment, screams, "But I gave to the poor!" And the response? Yes, but only to be praised by men. Intent mattered. Piety wasn't enough. Even Abraham's own deeds are weighed. The most disturbing part. Abraham witnesses two angels dragging thousands of souls toward a flaming pit. He asks Michael, "What is their sin?" And Michael answers, "They didn't believe in judgment. They lived as if this day would never come. They weren't murderers. They weren't devils. They were ordinary people, like you and me." And this broke Abraham. The man chosen by God, the patriarch of 3 religions, begged not to die yet. Not because he wasn't ready, but because he saw how unforgiving the process would be. Why this text was erased. This vision didn't match the simplified ideas of heaven and hell most religions wanted to promote. It taught that judgment is mathematical. That even the righteous can tremble. And that hell isn't for monsters, it's for those who wasted time. The church buried it. The rabbis banned it. But the message remained. Judgment isn't emotional. It's exact. And it's already written down. The Apocalypse of Zephaniah. The vision where even the angels cried, and the demons smiled. What if I told you there's a version of hell so horrifying? Even the angels couldn't bear to look at it. A realm where no one screams, not because they're at peace, but because their mouths have been sealed shut by divine command. This is the Apocalypse of Zephaniah, a banned and mostly forgotten apocryphal text where the prophet sees a version of the afterlife so emotionally brutal, so spiritually annihilating, that it left even the heavenly hosts in grief. Zephaniah's descent into the underworld. In this vision, an angel escorts Zephaniah down through the various realms of the dead. He expects to find justice. Instead, he finds a silence that feels worse than fire. New Moon. The first thing he sees is a man with no face, his identity erased for denying the image of God in others. Another soul is weighed down by massive stones, not as punishment, but because he bore the weight of others' sins without ever speaking out. Muted speaker. And then, there's the pit of the silent. Souls packed tightly together, shoulder to shoulder, eyes wide, mouth sealed, no sound, only tears. Zephaniah asks the angel, "Why are they not screaming?" And the angel answers, "They did not speak when they had the chance. So now they will never speak again." Where even angels break down. What sets this vision apart isn't just the suffering, it's the reaction of heaven itself. At one point, Zephaniah is shown a demon dragging a group of souls by their tongues. Suddenly, the angel beside him covers his face and weeps. "Why do you cry?" Zephaniah asks. The angel replies, "Because these were once priests and prophets.